Gas prices through the roof, American energy production way, way down. These things seem to be related. First year of Biden in office. These things seem to be related. I want to blame Joe Biden for this, and yet the left, the Democrats, they tell us it's not Biden's fault. These are older problems. This is ridiculous. He inherited the stuff. You just don't understand energy. You just don't understand the economy, Michael. Okay, I'm going to bring on someone who does understand energy and the economy. That would be Daniel Turner, the founder and executive director of Power the Future, which is a national nonprofit that advocates for American energy jobs. Daniel, thank you for coming on.
That's a pleasure to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into any substance on energy, on fossil fuels, on nuclear, perhaps on climate change, I want to focus on a more important question. Can I rightly blame Joe Biden for the energy mess right now?
Yes, and
Good.
We can talk about why. Very clear-cut case, absolutely.
Okay, so how is it? Because what the Democrats will tell you is, look, you're going to blame him for the Keystone Pipeline. The Keystone Pipeline wasn't even pumping energy. It wasn't even really operating. You're going to blame Biden for gas prices going up. Well, Biden doesn't control the cost of oil around the world. You're going to blame Biden for this, that, and the other thing. Well, look, we have a supply chain crisis. We have a COVID lockdown. We have this, we have that. It isn't the fault of Democrat policies. You say BS.
Yeah, total BS. And the reason why is because energy, it is a global commodity and it is on the global stage. But energy production in America has taken a huge hit. We are producing around 3 million fewer barrels of oil per day than we were just 15 months ago. And the reason why we're producing so much fewer oil is because of Biden energy and environmental policies. So, for example, you take someone like Deb Haaland, the Secretary of the Interior. She has stopped fracking on federal land. She has banned and stopped federal oil and gas leases on federal land. Just the other day, they stopped leasing in the Gulf of Mexico. So we're cutting into the supply. And as the supply dwindles, and we are dwindling, and the demand does not match that dwindling supply, well, then clearly prices will go up. So the way to reverse this is to produce more oil and gas. And proof of the fact that Biden knows this is that he's asking OPEC to produce more oil. He knows there's a supply problem, but why can't it be an American supply solution?
Well, I guess the Democrats' answer is that producing oil and gas is bad for the environment. It's going to kill us all within 10 years. That's what, and I'm not even exaggerating their point. They actually say it's going to be all over within 10 years. And that would be really bad and immoral for us to go into our, and it would be, it wouldn't be beautiful. It would be ugly. You know, we've got all these beautiful nature preserves, so we don't want to have oil rigs and things there. We don't want oil spills in the poor little baby seals. And so they say that we just don't want to do it. But I guess the point that you're raising is, why is it any better if the Saudis are producing it than if we're producing it here?
Yeah, well, if it is a global problem, if climate change is a global issue, then where it's produced doesn't matter. So the fact that China has more emissions than America and Europe combined, and China is exempt from everything like the Paris Climate Accord. Xi Jinping did not go to that climate summit last year in Glasgow. We just ignore that. So then we're acknowledging it's not really a global problem. It's about something larger. And to go back to your first point, this belief that it's a binary choice. We either have a pristine environment or we have a pollution. In America, it's not a choice. We have both. We are one of the cleanest countries in the world and the largest fossil fuel user. And it's the quality of life that fossil fuels has enabled us that makes us the envy of the world. And so the activists, the AOCs of the world say, well, we're going to die of climate change. You know who did die? Just about a year ago, almost 250 Texans died when the wind turbines froze during their storm. There's another storm right now, as we're talking, barreling down on Texas. And our philosophy is, let's hope the wind turbines don't freeze. So of those 250 people who died, where's their monument, right? Where are their protesters? And they died because liberal politicians have forced green energy on us. In separating it from reliable fossil fuels. We're going to get more of that under Joe Biden. And I just want to know how many more people are going to die before we realize this is all a racket.
That's a really good point. Real people are dying today because of policies designed to save hypothetical people in a decade. That doesn't seem like the right sort of trade-off. So, okay, you've convinced me to follow my priors and the beliefs that I already wanted to believe, that Biden and the Democrats are at fault here. So what is the answer on the substance of energy? Let's say there are three options. There's the leftist, stop coal, stop fossil fuels, stop producing, stop consuming, and just go die in a cold room so that the sun monster doesn't get us. I think I'm only slightly caricaturing their position. Then there's the drill baby drill position, where you just keep getting those fossil fuels out of the ground. And then some people have suggested a third position. Maybe we move off of fossil fuels and we move into, say, nuclear energy or some other kind of energy that for some reason the environmentalists don't seem to like either, but which is efficient and clean. Which of those three, or maybe a fourth option, do you think is America's energy future?
Well, I'm a fossil fuel advocate, so I'm going to choose B if those are my options. But just look at the year 2019 as an example. In 2019, before the COVID pandemic began, we produced more oil and gas than ever before. We employed more oil and gas workers. We brought in more oil and gas revenue to the federal treasury. We had it at the lowest average price point than we've had in decades. We didn't have a $4 and $5 gallon of gas in 2019. Gas was less than $2 a gallon at the pump. And we lowered emissions more than any other country in the world. And those things should not all jive together. We're told by the environmental left, you can produce more oil and gas and have lower emissions. And the reason why 2019 is such a banner year, we didn't discover a new oil and gas field. We didn't have a new technology invented. We just let the free markets do what it does best. And when free people are enabled to work in a free market, they produce more of a good at a lower price point for the greatest number of people in the most efficient way. It was an amazing year, and we've watched it all crumble, yes, because of COVID, but also because of Joe Biden. And we could go back to it. We just don't have, this administration doesn't have the political courage and the will to do so.
I really like this point. You can do both. It's not a binary. You actually can produce more energy, you can help more Americans, and you can reduce emissions. But then does that not imply that we should reduce emissions, that it's a good thing to, because I'm a little ambivalent on the question. I don't know. I do not believe the doomsday prophecies of climate change killing us all in a decade. I don't really believe the genius experts who can predict with absolute certainty what the weather is going to be like in Belize in 2057. And so, but I'm not also totally on the other side, where I think carbon emissions, we can just spew whatever we want into the atmosphere and that will have no effect on anything. I simply don't know. So what do you think is the reasonable conservative position here? Should we attempt to reduce carbon emissions, albeit in a way that is more conducive to continuing to use fossil fuels?
Yeah, I mean, carbon emissions is the metric du jour, and whether or not it's a good one, I can't answer that. Should we be as environmentally conscious as possible? Absolutely, and we are in America. And anyone who doesn't think we are has never been to an oil and gas site. They've never been in a coal mine or been to a coal plant. And this is where I spend the bulk of my time. But I agree with you. This emissions metric is thrown at us by groups like the United Nations and like the EU. And again, if emissions, but here's the joke about it. If emissions is your big motivating factor, look at countries like Germany. Their emissions are going through the roof. As they go greener, their emissions continue to go up. Look at countries like China and Russia and Brazil and India, which just scoff at emissions because their leaders, for good or for ill, and some of those leaders are bad actors, for good or for ill, those leaders are putting the economy of their countries ahead of everything, ahead of Greta Thunberg, ahead of the United Nations, ahead of everything. They're not going to compromise their electric grid, their manufacturing sector for some globalist standard. And God, I wish America would have the same courage of defending its economy and its workers and its productivity and prosperity, and just shun all of these globalist actors that are trying to do us harm.
Sure. Yeah. The idea that regardless of what you think about the carbon emissions, even if you do think it's the biggest deal in the world, the countries who are allegedly prioritizing this aren't doing much at all. I remember there was a report that came out, I think the first or second year of the Trump administration, after the environmental left was furious that we pulled out of the sacred Paris Climate Accord, and it turned out we had upheld our end of the bargain that we pulled out of much better than the signatories who actually remained in the Paris Climate Accord. So that's a great way to kind of break out of this, what might be a false binary here. But then, so I know that you're a fossil fuels advocate, but what would your take be on something like, for instance, nuclear power? For many years, it's been considered a great alternative energy, highly more efficient than any other kind of energy we've got. And yet the environmental left, which you would think would love nuclear energy, absolutely hates it. And they'd much rather have the windmills that kill all the birds.
Yeah, nuclear power is great and essential, and we should have more of it. And I believe actually the governor of Tennessee just announced that they were going to advance building a nuclear plant in Tennessee, which would be great if they did so. Countries like France get almost 80% of their electricity from nuclear power, and they don't seem to be very afraid of it. But yet here in America, we have this notion that it's this very scary technology that we have to run from. So no, I love nuclear and I embrace nuclear. But to build a nuclear plant, you need an awful lot of fossil fuels, right? And to build green energy, you need an awful lot of fossil fuels, wind turbines, solar panels. So this notion that we're ever going to get rid of fossil fuels is just a false one. The way our economy works, the way our goods are produced right now and manufactured and transported, all requires fossil fuels. Now, maybe in the future, we'll develop some technology that will get us off fossil fuels, but it's not even close to a reality. And electric vehicles, the Biden administration is all up in arms about electric vehicles and the post office, electric vehicles, that they have to all run on electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are all fossil fuels. And not only that, the minerals that are and the rare earths needed for electric vehicles to run are all mined with slave labor in the Congo, right? So it's that great Thomas Sowell quote, there are no solutions, there are just trade-offs. If you say we're going to get rid of combustion engines for electric vehicles, great. There's no more gas being burned, but there's 30,000 Congolese children working in a Chinese-owned slave mine. Is that the trade-off you want? Let's just be honest with the American people and say, it's one or the other, guys. This third choice doesn't exist yet. It's one or the other. I would choose American jobs over enslaving more children in the Congo.
But when you're looking at that time horizon, what do you say to the people who are warning that eventually all this dinosaur juice is going to run up and then we're going to be left high and dry?
Yeah, I mean, we've been predicting a peak oil. Jimmy Carter talked about peak oil in the 76 the presidential debates by the year 2000. And I say fossil fuels because it's a conventional term. Of course, I know it's not dinosaur bones. Oil and gas seem to be replenishing faster than we ever thought possible. And the more we look for it, the more we seem to find. I look at that as a blessing from God Almighty that has given us this amazing resource that has made us wealthier, healthier. I mean, Henry VIII would long for the life of comfort that the American average poor person has, right? I mean, just the goods, the quality, the medicine, the air conditioning, we have an amazing life because of fossil fuels. It's made us a better people. The people who are anti-fossil fuels, they're ultimately going to plunge more and more people into misery, poverty, awful third world conditions. The poorest countries, the most dirty, the most polluted, the most enslaved are the ones furthest from a fossil fuel economy. And that's why I will always advocate for fossil fuels.
There's a lot to get to, but first, March 2nd is Ash Wednesday. And over 1 billion people will start living different in some way. Maybe giving up chocolate or alcohol or whatever. For a lot of folks, Lent is a time of finding the easiest way to give something up. But at the end of those 40 days, did that sacrifice really make a difference? This year, there's a new opportunity out there specifically for men that will actually help you grow closer to God and become a better man. You might have heard me talk about Exodus 90, but let me tell you about Exodus Lent, a 40-day journey that will challenge you to dig a little deeper this year. Here's how it works. First, over the 40 days of Lent, men commit to daily prayer, setting aside a minimum of 20 minutes to spend with the Lord. Each day includes a scripture reading and reflection written to help men better understand, grow in, and live virtue. Second, More than just giving up chocolate, men take up a range of disciplines and sacrifices for the season of Lent. Sweets, snacks, social media, all gone. Third, men commit to a fraternity of 5 to 7 men. Each week, the fraternity meets to pray together, check in, hold each other accountable, and encourage one another. On Easter Sunday, you'll walk away with a new and wonderful understanding of what it means to live the full Christian life. Chocolate, bunnies, and all. Sign up at exodus90.com/Michael. What's your take on the political situation? Because for many years, you had the libs hated fossil fuels and they were trying to get rid of them, and the conservatives sort of reflexively defended the fossil fuels. Do you think that remains the case, or do you think there's something shifting? Perhaps the populist right or other factions of the new right that are coming up, are they more skeptical of fossil fuels?
No, I think fossil fuels as a philosophy or a concept, I think it's right up there with guns, masks, right? They're just large phrases that are emblematic of a much larger cause. And so to say I'm against fossil fuels, it's like carrying your green activist liberal card. Someone like Bernie Sanders, right, says he hates fossil fuels. His 4 homes, I'd love to know how they're powered, right? His glorious state of Vermont, which he says, we don't have any fossil fuels in Vermont, but they buy electricity from Quebec right across the border, which burns on coal. So Canadians will gladly sell the state of Vermont electricity at a premium. They're making money off of the dumb Vermonters. No offense to the people of Vermont, but these are dumb policies. Yeah. So congrats, you pat yourself on the back and say, we don't have fossil fuels in Vermont. No, you're just paying the Canadians for their fossil fuels. So again, people who hate fossil fuels, it's just this idea of celebrating liberalism. And heck, the biggest fossil fuel detractors, DiCaprio, and as soon as you turn around, they're on a 400-foot mega yacht. They're flying private jets. John Kerry's never going to give up his private jets. He hates fossil fuels until he has the jet to catch him to go windsurfing or snowboarding. His snowboard is made of fossil fuels. His suit is made of fossil fuels. They're all just so ignorant. It hurts me to have to deal with these people.
There does seem to be a real passing the buck here because, DiCaprio, John Kerry, who, to your point, has actually said explicitly, I will not give up my private jet. No. I need to get places fast, and I'm doing so much good for the world that it doesn't matter if I don't practice what I preach. This is what Leonardo DiCaprio is saying too. And then at the national level, I suppose you're seeing the same thing. Yeah, we're going to buy all this oil from Saudi Arabia or other places in the Middle East. Yeah, we're going to get electricity from Canada, but at least it's not us doing it. I'm just paying the money, but my hands are clean.
Yeah, and then the extension of that equation is by buying oil and gas from Russia. What is Vladimir Putin doing with his surplus wealth, right? Why didn't Vladimir Putin attack the Ukraine for the last 4 years? And there's a twofold reason when you get into foreign policy. One, I believe he truly saw President Trump as an unpredictable but fairly strong leader. And two, he didn't have the money. Right. But now that oil is close to $90 a barrel and 40% of the Russian economy is fossil fuel sales, well, Vladimir Putin is flush with cash. And what do people like Vladimir Putin do when they're flush with cash? They don't build schools for women, right? They don't empower minorities and give rights to gays and lesbians. They build armies and they invade countries. Iran has had many small attacks, Iran-backed militant groups on the UAE in the last couple of weeks, barely made any news. Why is Iran suddenly engaging in more terrorism? They have the money. They're flush with cash. So energy independence in America, building America's energy and fossil fuel economy, doesn't just lower prices for the average American family. It also depletes the coffers of some of the world's worst actors. And that's really good, isn't it? Wasn't it better when they had less money? And so again, Biden's philosophy, Biden's foreign energy policy is dictating his foreign policy, and Putin and the Ayatollah couldn't have come up with a better policy if they wrote it themselves.
Now, do you think, looking at 2022 and 2024, do you think that energy will be a top issue or just kind of sitting in the background? I remember in elections past, energy was basically the issue, or was certainly top three. Where do you think it stands right now?
Well, I think since it's driving our inflation and it's driving the cost of all goods, it's definitely going to lead in the elections, right? The economy is what is on the top of everyone's mind, and everyone paying a bill, every family, every mom driving their kid to school is suffering the price point. The problem, though, is that energy policies are not dictated by Congress. And so even if the Republicans got the House and the Senate, Deb Haaland is still not going to allow permitting on federal land. She's still going to push down these fracking mandates. Jennifer Granholm, the Secretary of Energy, when she's not laughing on camera, notice she hasn't been on camera in a long time, ever since she laughed off the fact that her policies were making energy expensive, right? She's still going to push her electric vehicles, mandates, et cetera. So yes, energy will drive a lot of the election cycle. But until there's a replacement in the White House, energy policy is going to stay as lousy as it is. And that's bad for America's economy and America's families as well.
That's a great point, that it, probably in the way that the government ought to work, Congress would have much more of a say here. But that's just not the way that it happens. A lot of these policies are coming right out of the executive branch. Often they're coming out of the administrative agencies. Sometimes there's virtually no electoral oversight on that at all. So all the more important for people to make their voices heard, not just at the ballot box in November, but beyond that, and especially looking into 2024. Daniel, where can people find you? I think they can find you everywhere. You're all over TV. You're all over podcasts.
And now I'm on your show, and I got to tell you, this is a great honor because I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. So I can check the box, boom, Michael Knowles show. I hope you'll ever have me back. But yes, powerthefuture.com, and thanks for a really good conversation about this very important issue.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your coming on because there's so much misinformation out there on these issues, and there's so many straw man arguments on the left, and you are a pyromaniac in a field of these, knocking down all of these straw man arguments from the left, which is very good. We can use all of our, we can actually use fossil fuels when we do that, I guess, to burn down these kind of silly arguments about even just the way the economy is working now. Because to your point, I think it's maybe the most astute point you made. They're not offering an alternative. They're not really offering much of an alternative at all. They're just offering much less efficient ways that are going to harm the American energy consumer and the American taxpayer. So thank you, Daniel. Appreciate you coming on. And
thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Hope so. Thanks.